What's going on, Browns fans? Welcome into the Cleveland Browns Report. Hope you guys are having a nice Friday to start your weekend. Coming up on today's show, we're going to talk about the latest Baker Mayfield drama because that happened right before we were going to start filming, so we snuck that into the top of the show. And then going to check out some trade ideas that the Browns maybe could pull off in the NFL draft to get back into round one. A bit ambitious, but we'll at least entertain the idea. And then we'll wrap up the show by looking at the Browns' biggest needs going into the NFL draft. And also, make sure you are subscribed. That way you can get the best Browns draft coverage. So go ahead and hit that big red button. Now, though, the latest Baker Mayfield trade destination. So it looks like Seattle's out of the running because they brought back Geno Smith on a one-year, $7 million contract. So they've already got Drew Lock there for about $4 million. They got Geno for $7 million. Do they really want to take another quarterback? It was expensive. It doesn't seem all that likely. Now, Ian Rapoport hopped on the Pat McAfee show and gave us this little nugget. To me, the Carolina Panthers seem to be the most likely spot for Baker Mayfield. The Buccaneers would make some sense to me as well. So now I would say a new team to this race because we've talked about Carolina for a little bit here. But here's what's interesting. His potential new wide receiver 1-2, Robbie Anderson, not excited about the idea. So here's a Panthers Instagram rumor Mish Mill account tweeting out what Rapoport just said about maybe the Panthers will get Baker Mayfield. And look at the bottom comment right there. Where is it? Right over there. Yeah, that's Robbie saying, no. Wow, that would be incredibly awkward if this trade gets pulled off, right? I'm not saying the Panthers would not do this trade anymore if they were like 80% of the way there and they go, well, Robbie Anderson said no. And then he doubled down, by the way, when someone's like, oh, Robbie Anderson, you don't want this trade. He's like, no, I don't want that trade. Now, the Panthers are just a hot mess. Like, not a pretty hot mess either. They traded a second and some other picks for Sam Darnold last offseason. That didn't work. Do they want to trade for another quarterback from the 2018 NFL draft class that the previous team gave up on before his first contract was even up? Matt Rule, the head coach down there, appears to be on thin ice. His OC got canned mid-season last year. He's not hitting, he's not delivering, and it's not looking good. They gave him a huge contract, and even the Panthers owner, David Tepper, did not have a very big sigh of confidence for his head coach, Matt Rule. So I don't know what the Panthers are going to do. Maybe they want to take Malik Willis or Kenny Pickett with the 6th overall pick. But Baker Mayfield, to me, seems like an upgrade, at least immediately, over Sam Darnold, Cam Newton, you can't rule that idea out, or whatever rookie quarterback they could pick at number 6 overall. Another potential Baker destination that we won't spend too much time on, but I don't know, I think it's funny. Tom Pelissero tweeted out yesterday. It's about the latest on Kyler Murray and how he wants a new contract. He wants an extension. The Cardinals haven't given him one yet, so now you get some murmuring and some grumbles about what if Kyler demands a trade and he will hold out from training camp if he does not get that option, doesn't get that contract. And Arizona's like, fine, we'll trade you to Philadelphia or the Giants. Would Cliff Kingsbury want his old quarterback back? Not in Oklahoma, right? Cliff was the head coach in Lubbock, Texas at Texas Tech, where Baker started his collegiate career, was a walk-on, didn't get that scholarship, and then walks on in Oklahoma. The two of them didn't have a romance, I will say, in the Big 12 together, but maybe Cliff Kingsbury will be like, damn, I don't have a good backup option. Baker Mayfield's the best quarterback available. And last season, 2 years in a row now, my teams have peaked in the first half of the season and have crumbled down the stretch. I don't think I'm on the hot seat, but I'm one bad season away from being on the hot seat. And Colt McCoy for 17 games? No. That looks like a type of food, like when you're younger and you're like, I don't want that. Or like in Step Brothers, like, I don't like fancy sauce. Like, that's how Colt McCoy, I don't like fancy sauce. But maybe Baker Mayfield, even though the two of them weren't, doing like jump ropes together in Lubbock, is better than what the alternative could be. Just an idea. So that's going to do it for the Baker Mayfield segment here. We'll put that drama behind us. Let's get on to some other segments on today's show. How about some draft day trades for Cleveland? I don't envision the Browns being super active in the trade market. on the NFL draft because they gave up a lot of their assets already to get Deshaun Watson. You can look at what picks they have remaining. A second and 2/3 are the best chips they can bring to the poker table to try and move themselves up and get closer to round one. But I'm guessing they don't want to give up more assets to get closer to round one after giving up a ton to get Deshaun Watson. Now, that's just my opinion. What about yourself? What do you think? Do you want to give up picks to trade up? Would you want to give up, say, 2-3 picks to get closer to round one or into round one? Y for yes or N for no. Let me know what you think down below. If a trade does happen, Cleveland takes their 44th and their 78th pick. That's their second and their first third round pick. And that's where they could try to move up, right? Try to, get somewhere closer to the first round. If they take those 2 picks, I think they end up maybe around here. This is like the draft trade value chart. If you take 44 and 78, package it together, you could end somewhere around here. This is just a rough idea. The end of the first round and the start of the second round. Now, who's going to be around there? If one of these 5 guys has slipped, now, Jahan Dotson, I wouldn't call it a slip, but Treylon Burks for sure. Devonte, Wyatt, yes. Olave, yes. And Boye, Mafe, around this ballpark range. But these are players I would give up assets to go get. There's other players I'm like, you know what? I'd rather just wait and take whoever's available at 44. But these guys, if they fall towards 32, 33, 34, maybe you do pick up the phone and jump up 10, 12, 15 spots. What do you think? Who would you trade up for? Who is a player where when you're watching the draft, and you know how long it takes, on Thursday night it's getting late and you're fighting to stay awake and you're like, if so-and-so does not get picked right now, I want Andrew Berry to pick up the phone and get the next pick in the draft to get this guy because he's a star and he has fallen 10 spots further than I expected, and I would love to go get him. Now, for the record, I oppose trading up this year. Not just in that, like every draft, but I think Cleveland, you got to remember, they've got to fill 53 spots on the roster. And so when you have little draft capital, you become more dependent on free agency. And so what that means is you've got to spend money on free agency. And if you don't have draft capital, how are you going to fill out that roster? Well, you have to do it by spending a lot of money to get free agents on your team. And that's expensive. But you know it's not? Second, third, fourth round contracts for 4 guaranteed years. Whereas a 1-year, $12 million free agent isn't the best financial thing for GMs. That's not what they want to do. So that's why this year I'd rather bank the extra draft picks, get 7 players for cheap for longer than be reliant on free agency next year to fill out your roster. Now, having said all that, I'll still entertain the idea of trading up. How about this one right here? The Browns move up to the final pick of round 1, get the Lions pick for 32, and because Detroit's just an absolute dumpster fire of an organization, they'll give us a 5th round next year. In exchange, the Browns give up that 2nd and that 3rd round pick of theirs. And who would they want to move up to draft at 32? How about Treylon Burks? This was a player that for a long time was top 15, top 16-ish in NFL mock drafts. I mean, we talked about him when the Browns had the 13th overall pick. Now, he's slipped lately because that's what the NFL draft does. It makes no sense, really, except for, like, the combine, which is not like Burks bombed at, but sure, he didn't have the greatest combine you'd like to have seen out of him. But still, this is what the NFL draft process does. It raises guys and it tears them down despite them not having played a snap in months. And after all, could the Browns end up with a wide receiver they were looking at 13 and get him at 32 at the price of just giving up your 2nd and your 3rd round pick? Last year, Treylon Burks for the Razorbacks was awesome. 1,100 yards, 11 touchdowns. He was he's been compared to as Deebo Samuel-esque. Not that he's like going to be the next Deebo Samuel, but he's got that versatility and where you could line him up. He's a fun player to have on your field. He's just one of those guys that you get the ball in his hands and he takes care of the rest. He does a lot of things very, very well. He's just not maybe the most polished route runner or, whatever, Todd McShay looks for when he's talking about wide receivers and changing his pants after the first 2 get picked. So we'll talk more about the NFL draft process in just a second. But make sure you got the Browns Report and just the mothership here, Chat Sports, as your home for the NFL draft. Listen, we'll be going live at Chat Sports for all 3 days of the NFL draft. That's April 28th to the 30th. Never missing a pick. And what do I mean by that? You know, ESPN in like round 3 is like, all right, well, we're not going to talk about this guy on the field at all. Instead, we'll talk about the tragic childhood upbringing he had, which is really awkward for everyone to talk about at his greatest moment in his life so far. No, we don't do that. We talk about the picks. We break them down. We actually let you know who you're getting, right? What to expect out of this player, all while having fun, all while cracking beers, sitting back, and having some shots of Fireball with you. Now, switching gears to the final segment of today's show, what are the Browns' biggest needs? I'm finally, gun to my head, going to rank them in order 1 to 5. And I probably will change my mind, even maybe during the show, because I keep going back and forth, right? I am like the worst girlfriend ever trying to figure out where to get dinner. That's what I've been like for figuring out my biggest needs in order for the Browns. Ultimately, though, I'm going to go number 1, defensive end. And this is kind of a blindsided one because if you've watched the show before, you know that I'm big fans of the wide receivers in this class. But are we all, like, okay? Right? Look at the depth chart right now. Myles Garrett is working with Chase Winovich on the other side. Now, if they bring Clowney back, that changes everything. But as of now, this is what it looks like. Like, are we all okay with Chase Winovich starting opposite Myles Garrett? He was more of an outside linebacker for New England last season, for the last 3 years. In fact, if you look at his stats, and I like the trade, okay? If you don't remember, it was Mack Wilson for Chase Winovich straight up pretty much. And Winovich in his first 2 seasons, a former third-round pick out of Michigan, was fantastic in Foxborough. 11 sacks combined. Last year, all he did was put up 1 QB hit. No sacks, no tackles for loss, no forced fumbles. There was a huge drop-off after years 1 and 2 into year 3. And that concerns me, taking someone who has potential, right? You saw it in the first 2 years, but trading for someone who did all of that in 2021 or lack of all of that, and just, yep, you get to start. We won't even really do heavy competition at that position. We'll look at my other draft needs in just a second, but make sure you're following us on Rumble as well, because here's a really cool thing about Rumble. If you don't have YouTube Premium, you know how annoying it is when you're trying to watch a video and you can't leave the app and have the audio play while like texting or doing something else on your phone? Well, at Rumble, you can. They'll let you do audio only if you want to hop off the app for just a second and send a text or hop on Twitter and have the video continue to play. So follow us, rumble.com/Browns Report. The link's in the comment. It's also like super high up in the description. So make sure you follow us. We crossed over 1,000 subscribers, so appreciate all of you that have already joined us over there. And if you haven't, I don't know what you're waiting for. My next 2 biggest needs right now, wide receiver and defensive tackle. I put these together because you can do interchangeable, right? The comment section is going to be split. We're going to have another Mason-Dixon line of I want a defensive tackle and I want a wide receiver. And I'm leaning more towards wide receiver. That's why I've got them slightly above. In fact, I saw this tweet from Dan Orlovsky, and it's actually really interesting. You look at the average salaries for the top 10 players by position. And this gives you an idea of how GMs are evaluating positions. No surprise, quarterback's number 1. But wide receiver has taken over edge. So teams are looking at this going, wide receiver is the second most important position. That's why we're paying it the second most. Okay? Look where defensive tackle is. Behind edge, is behind offensive line. You can find other ways to make a good defensive line without spending top dollar. And of course, this is the draft, but it's the same kind of principle of investing top dollar in the NFL draft. Now, we'll look at the depth chart again here to give you an idea of what the defensive tackle is. Now we look at the inside of the defensive line, and it's probably going to be it's going to be a 3-way battle between Elliott. So you got a 3rd-round pick 2 years ago, fourth round, Togiai to Ohio State last year, and then Taven Bryan, who you signed this offseason from Jacksonville, who former first-round pick that just hasn't really worked out down in Jacksonville, but like who has worked out down in Jacksonville. So what I'm trying to get at here is you can duct tape a defensive line to make it passable. Sure, it's not going to be the best, and that's why it is a need for the Browns. I'm not saying just skip out and go light on the position, but not every draft class will have an Aaron Donald. And I understand that won a Super Bowl for the Rams last season. But just because you need a defensive tackle doesn't mean it takes priority over other positions that could impact the game more. I think that's what I'm really trying to get across here. I mean, look at last year. The Browns cut Sheldon Richardson. They brought in 2 Maliks, and they had a top half run defense. They kind of put it together sort of last-minute-esque, and it worked out okay. So I'd rather see them address other needs before defensive tackle. Not blowing it off, but it's just not my top one. What do you think, though? What's the Browns' biggest need? After all that, my entire TED Talk, what is it going to be? Sound off below. Let me hear it. I'm expecting a nice split between wide receiver, defensive tackle, some edge rusher, of course, but that's what I've got going here. My 4th biggest need for the Browns, it's offensive tackle. And this may be, I don't know, I wouldn't say surprising, but it's like, you know what? I hadn't thought about it until you put it that way. One of those types of needs, okay? Why? Because you've got the injuries between Jack Conklin and Jedrick Wills for Wills since he came into the NFL, and Conklin since he came last year. He had those two bad injuries and patella surgery. He appears to be ahead of rehab, so that's great to see. But still, the ankle with Wills has just been with him since he stepped off the plane in Cleveland, and that's tough to see. It got better as 2021 went along, but at your tackle spot that you have not had a single. You've had speed bumps along the way. You haven't had a clean slate. No bad doctor's notes for a year. So I'd like to see them just add some extra depth at that position. Finally, I've got linebacker here, who actually, I might talk myself out of linebacker in the next 90 seconds because, of course, I'm not talking about JOK, but Anthony Walker was low-key not that bad last year. I don't think bad's even a fair word. He was good. He got hurt early on, and then he was fine after that. Taki, he was also low-key, a little bit slept on. Now, the Browns did a lot of defensive schemes that only had 2 linebackers on the field, so you never saw all 3 of these guys. It's not a traditional 4-3, right? It's more of a 4-2-5, getting an extra DB on the field. So the reason I've got linebacker at number 5 is, look at the depth chart, right? I'd rather just see some depth at this point because you've got a rising star in JOK, but I can't say the same for Walker and Taki, so why not just add some extra depth and let competition bring out the best player on the field? Guys, that's going to do it for us here on today's show. Appreciate all of you that made the Browns Report a part of your Friday. Hope you guys have a wonderful weekend, and we'll catch up with you later. I think we're going to have a mailbag video coming out this weekend, so stay tuned for that. But until then, go Browns.